im se svima, i malima i velikima, i bogatima i siromašnima, i slobodnjacima i robovima dade žig na njihovu desnu ruku ili na čela njihova, te da nitko ne može ništa kupiti ili prodati, osim onoga ko ima žig ili ime zvijeri ili broj imena njezina.
Pozdrav dragi narode, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Rusko-ukrajinski rat, druga strana priče ili svjedočanstvo sa lica mjesta. To je današnja tema. Naime, svjedoci smo da proteklih nekoliko godina ukrajinsko-ruskog rata smo slušali i mainstream medija službenu verziju priče. Sada kad se postavimo pitanje koliko u toj službenoj verziji priče ima stvarnih informacija, a koliko propagande, onda moramo razmisliti koliko je stvarno istina ono što čujemo. Zašto? Pa ako smo svjedočili za vrijeme pandemije da gotovo ništa nije bilo istinito što su nam govorili u mainstream medijima, onda moramo postaviti pitanje koliko nam je istinito od tih istih medija kada izvještavaju o rusko-ukrajinskom ratu. To me motiviralo da nađem svjedoka, odnosno u ovom slučaju svjedokinju koja se nalazi ovog trenutka u Donbasu, koja je večeras naš gost i koja je svjedočila o svim događajima od 2016. godine do danas kao francuska novinarka. Zato što je sada slaba veza sa Donbasom, mi smo iskoristili samo originalnu sliku gospođe Christelle i čućete naravno njen glas, jer je zbog naravno impulsa lakše održati vezu kada imamo samo glas. Stoga nemojte zamjeriti što nećete gospođu vidjeti uživo, ali ćete je čuti. A za vrijeme cijelog intervjua imat ćete prilike vidjeti njene originalne materijale snimljene na licu mjesta tokom ovog perioda. Stoga sam siguran da će vam biti vrlo zanimljivo. Hello Christelle, welcome to our show in Croatia.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
Can you tell us just a few words about yourself and your background?
So I'm a journalist working in Donbass since almost 9 years now. I'm from France. I moved to Donbass in 2016 to show what's really happening on the ground because we had a big problem in the French media about how the situation was depicted. And so since then I work here and live here permanently. And I obtained a few years ago the Russian citizenship. I first worked for a local news agency named Donai. Then I founded my own site, Donbass Insider. And last year, we transformed Donbass Insider in a real official news agency called International Reporters.
Great. Well, during our conversation, I'll put your materials that you took during the last, as you said, 8 years, and you have now opportunity for Croatian audience to explain what you were witnessing during your visit, exactly stay there in Donbass. Everything in detail about Russian-Ukraine conflict or war.
So this video is it's from 2023. It's during Easter. People get to the church for the liturgy, and Ukrainian army shelled the center of Donetsk in the middle of the night. And of course, some people were killed. It was a purely civilian area, and this is the central market of Donetsk. It was shelled so many times since the beginning of the special military operation. It is the same. It's a purely civilian area, like you can see. It's just a market. It was shelled, I think, 4 or 5 times. Every time there were, unfortunately, victims among the civilians. You can see here the holes that the rockets have let. Every time I try as a maximum to document, to fix the direction of the shelling, the type of ammunition, to prove the origin. Of course, when it's shelling done by HIMARS or like 155 millimeters shell, or these rockets which are done by the Vampire launch rocket, multiple rocket launcher. So we have the direct proof that it's Ukraine, because these weapons are only on the Ukrainian side; they are not on the Russian side. So on this video, you see it was a taxi driver. He was injured, and the woman who was sitting in his taxi was killed directly by the shelling.
That means they are shelling civilians.
Yeah, and it's since 2014. Since 2014, the Ukrainian army has shelled repeatedly purely civilian areas. The aim is really to terrorize the people, to kill a maximum of purely civilian. They know when they shell. When you shell a school, when you shell a church, when you shell a market. I mean, you cannot have. You know where they are. I mean, they have not moved after 2014, So they know it's purely civilian areas. And unfortunately, civilians cannot answer, When they shell military targets, of course, the soldiers can answer. They can shell back, they can strike back, but civilians cannot. And that's why they are also shelling civilians. We have seen today what happened in Suja, in the Kursk region, where Ukraine has shelled the school where civilians were hiding. They tried to pretend it was Russia, but there was 4 launch of rockets from the Sumy region, which is in Ukraine, in direction of Suja, which were recorded just before they announced that pretendly Russia has shelled the school on our own territory. So, yeah, it's really a bad habit from Ukraine, and it has all begun with the Maidan in 2014. It was presented to the Western audience and all the countries in the world like a dignity revolution, but in reality, it was a colored revolution orchestrated by the CIA. We have to remember this fun discussion between Victoria Nuland and the American diplomat in Kiev, where she explained that they have put $5 billion to, put democracy in Ukraine, so on. And so now they were deciding who will be the next prime minister after they get rid of Yanukovych. And it's just crazy. I mean, they were deciding for Ukraine who will rule the country. We have seen the big difference between what was said in the media, that it was grandmas and peaceful students who were doing the Maidan, and in reality, the pictures on site were shown neo-Nazis, real neo-Nazis, guys with neo-Nazi symbol on the arms and so on. Who had weapons, and they were, shooting on the Berkut, so the special cops to manage, when you have huge protests, which can be dangerous, and they were even throwing to them Molotov cocktails. This video, is from the 1st of January last year. Just after midnight, so at the moment where usually this place, which is a central place of Donetsk, it's the Lenin Square, usually there is a Christmas tree there, and people gather here for the new year. Thanks God, we anticipated, the authorities of the DPR anticipated, and they forbade any gathering there, and no Christmas tree. And thanks God they have done that, because if this place would have been full of people like usually, it would have been really a massacre, a bloodbath, really.
If I understand well, they were doing this all the time until 2022. That means they were shelling
all the time. Even when the Minsk agreements were signed, they were always shelling. Since 2016, I have seen and I've documented myself a lot of shellings. We had even some period where they shelled more. Like beginning of 2017, they heavily shelled. So, what we see now is that Tochka U, this Tochka U, which was sent by Ukraine on a district of Makeyevka, near как это, like a place where they are transforming, oil into benzene and so on.
Refinery.
And and refinery, and it fell really in the garden of these people. This Tochka-U was sent by Ukraine. I know that at the beginning of the special military operation, Russia was accused to send such missiles on the Ukrainian territory, but it's completely false because Russia has no more Tochka-U. And it was even documented by an American magazine, which is specialized into like doing full inventory of all the armies in the world. So they are inventorying all the weapons they have. And in 2019, this magazine wrote clearly that Russia has get rid of its last Tochka-U, and because they have developed the Iskander, so they had better missiles, so they didn't use anymore the Tochka-U. The Tochka-U was used by Ukraine already since 2014. They have shelled a lot of cities like Snezhnoye, like Perez, with these missiles. And at the beginning of the special military operation, they shelled even the center of Donetsk with one of these missiles. And what you have to know, these missiles are really highly destructive. They contain it's a sub-ammunition weapon. So it explodes. It's spreading a lot of boxes, which are themselves full of explosive with shrapnels.
And tell me, how many percentage of Russians are living in this area?
So, on the territory which is now under Russian control, in the Donetsk People Republic, we are almost 2.5 million. In LPR, I think it's 1.5 million or 1.6 million, so something like this. I don't have the exact numbers for the Zaporozhye and the Kherson region, but it's several millions of people. Yeah, it's like at least 8 million or 9 million of people.
Russians, all of them are Russians.
All of them are now Russians, yes, most of them. I mean, some people may have refused to take the Russian citizenship, it's their right, but most of people have taken it and have asked for the passports.
Okay, we'll come later to referendum, and on this referendum they decided to connect with Russia. But tell me, what do you think? What is the reason they were shelling all the time these regions from side of the Ukrainian army?
Because they were not happy with the fact that already in 2014, the Lugansk and the Donetsk region held a referendum to separate from Ukraine. So when the Maidan occurred, when Yanukovych was deposed as the president, it was fully unconstitutional. They did not respect the Ukrainian constitution. They tried, of course, to kill Yanukovych. Then they would have had a constitutional reason to remove him and to replace him, but they did not succeed. So they replaced him first by Turchinov, who is really an horrible man, really. I mean, it's really the devil. And so this guy did not accept the fact that in the eastern part of Ukraine, people did not agree with the Maidan. Yanukovych was legally elected. It was the legitimate president of the country. And so they did not accept that, and they did not accept two things. The first decision of the new parliament after the removal of Yanukovych was to remove to Russian language its status of official regional language. People have to understand that in Ukraine, it's not like one country, one language. It's not functioning like that. Ukraine is a very young country. It did not exist before 1917. Most of its territory before that was part of the Russian Empire. Mm-hmm. So people there were Russians. So, of course, a majority of people, especially in the eastern part of Ukraine, are ethnically, linguistically, culturally, and even religiously Russians. Mm-hmm. So it's Orthodox people who speak Russian at home. It's the first language they learn. In the western part of Ukraine, there you have more people who speak Ukrainian, but you have also people who speak Magyar, so people from Hungary, and even some Romanians. So under Yanukovych, Russian has acquired some kind of official status in the regions where majority of people speak Russian. So it means people could have administration, official papers, and so on written in Russian, so that they understand. They can understand the administrative procedures and so on. And so the first decision of the new authorities after the Maidan was to remove this status to the Russian language. And these, of course, the people who were in region where high majority, like it's 90% of the people were native Russian speakers, did not accept that. And the second point they didn't accept, it was the fact that the new authorities in Kiev put people who were collaborators of the Nazis during the Second World War, like Stepan Bandera and Roman Shukhevich, as national heroes of Ukraine. These people and their henchmen were responsible of death of many Jews, Polish civilians, Russians, prisoners. They really were terrible, terrible people, and they really collaborated with the Third Reich and voluntarily, and they were themselves anti-Semites and so on. They welcomed the Nazis in 1941. And so people here did not accept that. They did not accept the rewriting of history and putting Nazi collaborators as national heroes. And so people began to protest. And the Kiev authorities did okay, we don't see and we don't hear anything. So it escalates. It escalated until the point people took under their control, without any weapons, administrative buildings. They began to storm SBU offices, police stations, and so on, and even the military bases. And that's when the Kiev regime began to react. So they sent the army to try to crush into blood all this. It was not only the Donbass, they crushed it in blood in Kharkov also, and in Odessa. We have to remember what happened in the Union House in Odessa, the 2nd of May, 2014, where around 40 people were killed by these Ukrainian neo-Nazis. And so this repression worked in Odessa and in Kharkov, but in the Donbass it didn't work. It didn't work. On the contrary, it pushed people to reject completely Ukraine, and they decided to hold a referendum to secede from Ukraine, to make their independence. So it's the Lugansk and Donetsk region. And so on the 11th of May 2014, the referendums were held, and they obtained more than 90, it's almost 90% in DPR and 93, if I well remember, in the Lugansk People's Republic for the independence from Ukraine and the instauration of the Donetsk and the Lugansk People's Republic. And so after that, the Ukrainian army began to shell them.
What was the role during this period of United States policies there? I know that they had huge influence.
Of course, they financed the Maidan. You have to remember the Maidan was held during months. It began in November 2013 and it ended in February 2014. They had people who lived permanently on the Maidan place, the Independence place. So all these people were paid. The protesters were paid where they were on the Maidan. There were a canteen, like a nursery for people injured and so on. It was a huge organization, and they paid for that. And after that, they began to provide money to install new media, like Hromadske, for example, were pro-Maidan, and so on. And they began to inject money and then weapons. At the beginning, it was money, and but before a few months before the special military operation began, they began to actively provide Ukraine with the Western weapons. So we began to see French equivalent of the RPG. They were beginning to receive these Javelin from the US and so on. So the US were actively there, and they took control of a lot of things in Ukraine. The CIA had like an office directly in the SBU building, so the Ukrainian Secret Service. They worked directly together. We have like in them for torture method. Because people who were captured by the SBU, tortured by them. The methods are the same, like the waterboarding. It's the same that these methods which were authorized by the CIA. We have seen also a huge involvement of the United States in all the program of biolaboratory in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Can you say more about these biolaboratories from United States in Ukraine?
So, US have a lot of these laboratories around the world, and they had 46 in Ukraine, which they financed. Officially, it was to monitor like epidemics and so on, pandemics. But in reality, when the special military operation began and some of these laboratories fell under control of Ukraine, we discovered that they were working on very dangerous pathogens, and some of them in laboratories which were not adequate for that. So the level of security was not enough to work on things like anthrax or the dark death, or the pestifera, all this stuff, and they work also on a lot of like hemorrhagic fevers of Crimea, Congo, and so on. And it's really dangerous pathogens. I mean, viruses and bacteria, which are really dangerous. And the thing is that these laboratories are not, for some of them, the levels. And the second is that they gathered a lot of biomaterial from Ukrainian soldiers, which were of more Russian ethnicity, so from the eastern part of Ukraine. They collected a lot of biomaterials. And the thing is that long before the special military operation, there was a scandal in Russia. They discovered an American company was gathering DNA material from Russians. And the aim was not really clear, and this company was working for the US, it was a contractant for the US military department. And so we discovered that they were searching for some diseases who can target some ethnicity, more than others. And so Russia understood that they were working on biological weapons in these laboratories, which are not in America. So this, they can say, but it's not us. We just give them some money, and what they do, it's officially not our program, not our project, but in reality, it was their project and their program. And that's why they have destroyed the maximum of material when the special military operation began. In a hurry, they began to destroy all the pathogens and so on, but they did not succeed to delete everything. So we found documents, we found some pathogens, which were later destroyed by Russia because they were too dangerous, in Mariupol, for example. And they also used the Ukrainians experiment. So they tested drugs for American companies like Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and so on Ukrainians, people who were in a psychiatric hospital, and even on children.
Well, it seems that they are testing things they cannot do in the United States, they do it in Ukraine.
Yeah, and not only in Ukraine. I mean, as I said, they have installed all around the world. They have around 300, more than 300 of these laboratories. I mean, after the first discoveries of Russia, even China asked in 2022 to the US to justify what they were doing in all these laboratories around the world. So, of course, they are outsourcing illegal stuff in these laboratories around the world, so that they cannot be considered as responsible.
Yeah, they call it gain of function.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. They call this program gain of function. That means they're gaining function of viruses in laboratories. We now have confession from side of CIA who confirmed it that a lab leak theory that this COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, came from Wuhan laboratory.
And what they were working on the COVID in these biolaboratories in Ukraine. They worked on a lot of other pandemics. They worked also on some pathogens who can migrate from birds, which are migrating between Russia and Ukraine, and they studied the pathogens who can then after go to humans.
Mm-hmm.
So they were really working on very dangerous stuff. I'm read and official aim to Ukraine manage its pandemics and so on is really a joke. I mean, after the Maidan, Ukraine really became like an epidemic center. I mean, the measles, for example, and it spread to levels that you see normally only in very poor African countries.
Well, we see now a place where Zakharchenko was killed. Can you tell us who was him and what happened?
It was the first head of the Donetsk People's Republic, so it's like a president, but it's not the title of president. It's head of the Donetsk People's Republic. He was elected in 2014. It was the former commander of the Oplot battalion. So he was involved in the defense of Donbass against the Ukrainian army since 2014. He had multiple assassination attempts against him before. And unfortunately, on the 31st of August 2018, the Ukrainian Secret Service, with the help of the Western Secret Services, succeeded to kill him in a terrorist attack. They made this restaurant that you see behind Eduard Basurin explode just when Alexander Zakharchenko entered into it. It was, I think, the seventh time they tried to kill him, and this time, unfortunately, it worked. He was killed with one of his bodyguard, and many people were injured because, of course, they were not alone in this restaurant. And unfortunately, he's not the only one who has been killed like this. Ukraine is really a terrorist state. I mean, they use terrorist attack, and they don't even, they're not shy. I mean, they even admit it. I mean, they have used a terrorist attack against the Crimean Bridge. First, they claim it's not them, but a few months after, they were boasting that, yeah, it was us. They have organized the terrorist attack in Crocus City Hall in Moscow. They have killed several commanders or officials in Donetsk and in Lugansk People's Republic with such attacks. Like the commander Motorola was killed also during the explosion of the lift in his building where he lived with his wife and child. I mean, this time he was alone with a bodyguard. He was not with his wife and child, but it could have been, this kind of thing. They have killed several people like this, like procurers, ministers. It's a specialty, and it's not surprising when you know that they have reinstalled Bandera as a national hero. Stepan Bandera was a terrorist. He made several political assassinations against Polish politicians, because at this moment the region where he was born was part of Poland. The region around Lvov and Ivano-Frankivsk was part of Poland, and he killed he and his group killed several Polish politicians during terrorist attack. So it's part of their ideology. For them, it's acceptable to do that. And so what you see now, it's the day that people were coming to say goodbye to Alexander Zakharchenko before we sent his coffin to the cemetery. And there was so much people this day that they had to prolong the time frame to let people put flowers and say goodbye. First, they had planned, I think it was 2 hours, and they had to prolong like 1 hour and 1 hour and a half more because there were too much people. And even like this, it was not enough. You see people just transmit flowers to others because they had no time to get inside the building to say goodbye. We had more than 200,000 people gathered in the center of Donetsk to say him goodbye is just amazing. I mean, you have to understand that Donetsk is a town of 1 million people. So when you have already more than 1/5, and I think it's much more. I think honestly we had like 1/4 or 1/3 of all the population, because really you had no place. You had no place. I mean, all the center of the town was completely full. You see the number of people is just amazing, and it was really a big tragedy for all the Republic, because he was a really great man, really honest, direct, really ready to solve the problems of people. Very close to them also, because before 2014 he was a guy who worked in a coal mine. Then he made some new studies to learn economy and to launch his own business. It was like he was not like a politician of career, like let's say like this, like in the example.
Yeah, he was a regular guy who succeeded in policy. Tell me what they want to accomplish with this assassination.
The aim was really to destabilize the Republic. We have seen at the same time preparation. They began to gather troops. I think they hoped that it would disorganize completely the Republic, and especially the defense part. But it didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work. I mean, all the people gathered around the new authorities, the new head of the Republic. It was then chosen to be Denis Pushilin, who was the head of the parliament, like the president of the parliament. And so they just step back, and they didn't do more at this moment. But I think the aim was after to attack the Donetsk People's Republic, counting on the chaos after the death of Alexander Zakharchenko, because he was himself a commander of a battalion, so he had an experience in managing troops and elaborating military strategies and so on.
Well, now we're going to 2022, when this special military operation started, and everybody around the world said that Putin invaded Ukraine. Can you tell me your side of story?
So what really happened is that mid-February, on the 17th, Ukraine suddenly began to heavily shell the two People's Republics, so Lugansk and Donetsk, after a relatively period. So we had very few violation of the ceasefire before that, but we have seen during the 2 months before it all began, accumulation of forces of weapons on the front line. So especially the Donetsk People's Republic had sounded the alarm several times. I myself wrote several articles about how they expressed these fears. So we saw that they prepared for an escalation. At the same time, Zelensky was telling that, okay, we have to throw away the Minsk agreement. Like, okay, we will never, apply them. So we understood that, okay, it's bad. I mean, we are going on the wrong direction, and that it will escalate. We didn't know exactly when, but so mid-February, suddenly they began to heavily shell, especially civilian areas in the Donetsk and the Lugansk People's Republic. And when I say it's really huge, I mean, we had like the day before we had like just few shells, and then the day after we had like 500 shells, and the second day we already were on 1,000 shells. It was really exponential, and it made the civilian victims. So very quickly, the authorities of the two People's Republic understood it was serious, and organized the evacuation of women, children, and the elderly people already on the 18th, and the global mobilization, because we understood that at this moment, between DPR and LPR, I think in total we had something like 40,000 soldiers in the People's Militia, and we understood that we had against us more than 500,000 soldiers on the Ukrainian side. And so it was clear, I mean, we were not enough to just stop them. I mean, it was not possible. So all the reservists were called, global mobilization in the two republics, but we understood you need time to train the guys who never took a weapon in their hands. And so quickly on the 21st of February, Russia officially recognized it was something it didn't 2014. Never Russia recognized the DPR and LPR before that, and signed like a military cooperation agreement with them. It was like a last step to try to push Ukraine to step back, to say, okay, guys, stop this immediately. We recognize these two republics. We will provide them security guarantees. Stop this. Stop this now, and all will be okay. But Ukraine didn't step back. And so on the 24th, early morning, Vladimir Putin made this official speech where he announced the beginning of the special military operation. It was a full surprise. I mean, I was woken up at, I think, something 6 in the morning. People told me, Chris, Putin has announced the beginning of the special military operation. The Russian troops are entering through the border. They're going to save us. And that's how people reacted, because we were really, really angry. I mean, people were really afraid of what would happen. And when we learned that Russia will come and protect us, I mean, it was a great joy here in Donbass, where, oh my, the Russian army is arriving. And so that's how it all began there. And people were waiting for that. I mean, it's already a long time that people wanted that Russia intervene to protect people, because we had lost so many people killed during all these years of the so-called Minsk agreements, that people were tired of this situation. And at the same time, when everything began, we understood that they wanted to attack. They began to test our defenses to see where they can make the first strike. And so it was really a critical situation. I had friends who asked me to evacuate because they thought it was too dangerous for me to stay. But I say, no, I will stay and continue my work here no matter what. And I was like most of the people here. The whole day on the 24th, people and even neighbors called me and asked me, it's true, the Russians are coming. And I said, yeah, we have already the images. They are crossing the border and they arrive. They will protect and save us. And people were so relieved here. I mean, it was a joy. It was a day of joy here in the Donbass.
That means that if Russia didn't came, for sure, Ukraine would attack these two states.
Yeah, and they would have committed a genocide. I mean, they were clear on that. They wanted to clear Donbass from all the separatists and so on. Heard such speech on the Ukrainian side, so it was really clear that if Russia didn't intervene, it would have meant really a bloodbath. And as I said, it had already begun. I mean, we have seen that. They began by shelling heavily all the civilian areas. As I said, even the 14th of March, they shelled the center of Donetsk with this Tochka U, with sub-ammunition. The Tochka U is really a heavy weapon which can kill a lot of people on a huge surface. So when you shell the center of a city with that, you understand that you will do a massacre. Yeah. And we have seen also...
Yeah. We see now film from Azovstal, from Mariupol. Yeah. You were there lots of time. Can you tell us what was happening there?
So Mariupol was the moment we understood that this war would really be difficult. The Ukrainian soldiers were hiding behind civilians' back. They really use civilians as human shield. That's where they began to use this technique on a very high scale way. That's why the liberation of Mariupol took several months. Even in Azovstal, they have taken hundreds of civilians there. Officially, like to protect them. In reality, it was to protect themselves, because they knew that the Russian army will not heavily bomb the Azovstal plant if they knew there were civilians. I have an history like this. We made an interview with one inhabitant of Mariupol who was living in a high building, and the high building was a bit destroyed but not completely. And we discussed with him, and he explained that these high buildings, the Ukrainian soldiers stayed there 3 weeks, because it was really well oriented and in a form not a complete circle, but almost. And it helped them to keep this place during 3 weeks against the Russian army. And when the Russians arrived, the people who were sitting in the basement asked them, but did you know that we were here? And the Russians said, yes, that's why we didn't raise the building to the ground. And that's why it took us 3 weeks to liberate you. because we knew that you were in the basement and we didn't want to kill you by accident, So they said if you the civilians were not in the basement, we would have just called the airplanes, the warplanes, and we would have razed to the ground this building with the Ukrainian soldiers inside. And since then, Ukrainian army has used this technique and everywhere in Mariupol. And we have heard stories which were really terrible. They prevented the civilians to evacuate. They have blocked the roads immediately when the town was surrounded. Even if Russia had given like green corridors, they have killed people who tried to evacuate. We found 1 year after bodies of 2 civilians, a woman and a man, on one of the roads who were going out of Mariupol. And it's clear they were killed at the beginning of the battle because they still had very warm clothes, and it's visible that they were tied and that they were assassinated. So we had the confirmation in 2002. So people would try to evacuate, even with children, even if it was written on the cars, like they were writing GT children on the cars, they shot on these cars. And for me, Mariupol was really a terrible stuff because a lot of buildings were destroyed, and in the courtyard of this, many apartment building, you had tombs. I mean, people were just buried here because it was too dangerous to take them to the cemetery. Shelling were falling everywhere, and they had to bury their loved ones just like this, like they could. And we had to do a lot of work after to exhumate these bodies, identify them clearly, and re-bury them properly, in the cemetery. Really, what I've seen in Mariupol was really terrible. For me, it was when I heard the stories, the people told me how the Ukrainian soldiers were behaving with them, using them as human shield, as hostages. It was really hard. It was really hard, yeah.
Why is Mariupol was so important? They are port, but what was the strategic importance?
So it's not only the port, it's also the industries, because Mariupol was also a big metallurgical, and is still a big metallurgical city. There are 2 big metallurgical plants. It's Azovstal and the Lica plant. So Azovstal will not be relaunched. It's so much destroyed, and we are still in the process of demining it. So there are so much mines, traps, unexploded ammunition. It's not finished. I mean, we need, again, several years to work on this. The Lica plant has already been relaunched little by little. But also the port. The port and all this important because first to receive and products by the sea. The second, it was also a big source of money for Kiev. People have to understand that before the Maidan, before 2014, the Donbass, just the Donbass. I don't speak even of the other regions, of the eastern and south part of Ukraine, but just Donbass was representing 15% of the GDP of Ukraine and 25% of its industrial potential.
Mm-hmm. That means economic part of this
industrial city like Mariupol. Yeah, it's a very important point. So they could not accept to lose it. So it's one of the big ports of Ukraine. The last one they have is Odessa now. So that's why it was really important for them to defend this place. So that's why they more than 2 months to liberate it. But you have to understand, for people who don't understand, that in 2014, when there was this referendum to secede from Ukraine, towns like Mariupol voted. I mean, the whole Donetsk and the whole Lugansk oblast, the whole regions, voted during these referendums. It's just after the beginning of what Ukraine called the anti-terrorist operation. That's how they call that. Some parts of these regions were taken under control back by Ukraine. And there were a permanent military presence in these regions, including Mariupol. Mariupol was one of the most fortified area of the Donbass before the special military operation. I mean, it was really crazy.
Well, what happened after that battle? How war continued to develop and this special military operation?
So when Russia decided to intervene, it intervened into a very fast way and had taken under control not only parts of Donbass, but also of the neighboring region, I mean, to make the junction with Crimea. So it has taken big part of the region of Zaporozhye and Kherson. Now, most of the Lugansk People's Republic has been liberated. Just few villages are still now under Ukrainian control. After the Battle of Mariupol, Russia has continued to liberate part of the south of the Donetsk People's Republic, and after began to work more on the north, like all these Artyomovsk, Avdiivka, and so on. And there were some moments where it had to go back, like end of 2022, because Russia really thought that it could force Ukraine to negotiate, and it worked at the beginning. There were these Istanbul agreements, but then the Western partners, let's say the Western patrons of Ukraine, came. They sent Boris Johnson, who said, no, don't sign any weapons and you will fight back. And so there was a moment where the Russian soldiers were really undernumbered faced to the Ukrainians that had to go back a bit, like in Kherson and in the Kharkov region. But since last year and this Ukrainian counteroffensive, which didn't work at all, it is the contrary. Now Russia is again advancing and the front is moving now at a quite fast pace. Now we see that like 70% of the Donetsk People's Republic is liberated. And I think when it's done, that it will be the turn of the Zaporozhye town, because it's still under Ukrainian control. We see that we advance also in Kharkov. And this last year, Ukraine made an attack in the region, but it is the same. The territory that is under their control is shrinking day after day. So at the moment, the situation is really bad for Ukraine. And we see that the US is pushing Zelensky to lower the age of conscription, first to 21 year, and then it will be 18. And the thing is that Ukraine is already in a big demographic catastrophe. I mean, we obtained the statistics for last years. They have like 4 times more deaths than birth.
Can you repeat, please?
So last year in Ukraine, they had 4 times more death than births, than birth. So you understand that their population is just dying.
Yeah. And how many?
They will disappear. They will disappear.
How many people died in this war?
It's hard to have numbers. Of course, the different parties don't divulgate their numbers. But there are some projects on both sides to, at least, for example, count the necrologies. Once, yes, they publish that in the media, on media. And there are some people who have done some like bots to calculate automatically. And on the Ukrainian side, we are sure that they have at least 506,000 deaths. And I say at least because they were identified and buried in Ukraine. But you have to understand that Ukrainian soldiers are abandoning the corpse of their dead comrades a lot of time. Not long ago, there were an exchange of corpses between Russia and Ukraine. I think Russia recovered something like 40 bodies and gave back to Ukraine 752. And we have still thousands of bodies in Russian morgues, which are Ukrainian soldiers. And there are also these soldiers which were buried without being identified. And last estimation we have is that there are more than 10,000. So I think in Ukraine, they are already close to the million soldiers dead.
This is really disaster.
It's a pure disaster.
Yeah,
It's a pure disaster for Ukraine, especially when you know that now in Ukraine, a bit more than, say, 20, 24, 20, maximum 25 millions of people. That's what's left of their population. Millions fled the country. Some millions now are on the Russian side, on the Russian territory. And so 1 million dead, and you have to add all the injured, especially the ones who are heavily injured, people who have lost like 1 or 2 legs or 1 or 2 arms or the sight or things like that. On the Russian side, there is this project from BBC and I think the last numbers are 100 and something. And it's logical because if you look at the difference of firepower.
Christelle, please repeat the last sentence because line was broken. About number of killed from Russia side.
So what the Medusa and BBC project have counted is, I think, something like 140,000, if I well remember the last numbers, which is logical because the difference of firepower between Ukraine and Russia is from, let's say, 1 to 8, 1 to 10. So it's logical that the number of deaths on the Ukrainian side are something like 8 times or 8 to 10 times more than the Russian side. So that's the reality. People who say that Russia lost millions of soldiers, it's not true. It's not true. Russia has not done permanent mobilization like Ukraine. They mobilized once in 2022, and that's all. All the rest, it's people who voluntarily engage in the army, and it's enough to replace for the losses, which means that the losses on the Russian side are much, much less than on the Ukrainian one.
Tell me, Christelle, what do you think? Is there any chance for peace there?
I would like to hope, but the problem is the Western countries have discredited themselves. First with the Minsk agreements, we remember and François Hollande stating officially and publicly that the Minsk agreements never meant to be applied, and so Angela Merkel and François Hollande publicly claimed that the Minsk agreements never aimed to be accomplished, to be applied. That the aim was to buy time for Ukraine to rearm, to reinforce its army, to regain the Donbas territory by force. I mean, they told it really publicly. You can find the declaration online. And the second time is when they destroyed completely the Istanbul agreements in 2022. So the problem is now that Russian authorities have not any confidence. They don't believe what the Western countries can sign. And on the Ukrainian side, Zelensky is not legitimate anymore. His mandate ended last year. There should have been election in Ukraine to elect a new president. So he's illegitimate. So with whom Russia can sign an agreement?
Well,
that's the main problem.
I hope that new president of the United States will do hard to stop this conflict because, as you said already, too many people died, and this war has to stop because suffering is too big and it cannot continue like this. Christelle, thank you for your time. Thank you for your information and your bravery there. And really, you've done a great job. And I hope my viewers now will understand more what was really happening in Ukraine and how everything started and what is happening in the present moment. And maybe we'll look in this conflict in the future with a different eye.
I hope so. And if your readers who speak English want to, we have our website, International Reporters. We have content in English, and we have also a Telegram channel in English. So if people want to have access to daily news about what is happening, not only in the special military operation, but also around the world, we publish every day content there, interviews with people here, and so on. So they can follow us if they want to have more information.
Thank you, Christelle. I'll put your link below. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Evo, dragi narode, siguran sam da mnogi od vas nikad niste čuli za ove informacije koje ste čuli danas. Naime, ako se sjetimo dobro kad je počeo taj rat, a neki nazivaju specijalna vojna operacija, prvi potez koji je napravila Europska komisija i Ursula von der Leyen jeste da je zabranila sve programe koji donose informacije s druge strane. Dakle, cenzura. Jasno je kada je u pitanju vojni sukob da ima i specijalni informacijski rat. Međutim, kada uvedete cenzuru, onda imate i ozbiljnog razloga zašto ne želite da vaši građani Europe čuju i drugu stranu priče. Jer kako objektivno razumjeti neki problem ako nemate informaciju? A svjedočili smo da se od prvog trenutka ovog sukoba jednoglasno optuživalo Rusiju za sve i tko god je postavljao pitanje je bio proputinovac. Ako god nije htio iz prve ruke da povjeruje cijelu priču i da postavlja pitanje zašto toliko podržavamo taj rat, odnosno Ukrajinu u tom ratu, taj je odmah bio također neprijatelj države i neko ko se zalaže za okupaciju Ukrajine. Ja sam prvog dana znao da stvari nisu onako kako nam prezentiraju, pogotovo kada sam vidio kako je Hrvatski sabor jednoglasno podržao Ukrajinu u ovom sukobu. Ne kažem da u ovom trenutku ne treba podržati Ukrajinu, niti da treba podržati Rusiju. Međutim, ono što treba čuti obje strane. Treba razumjeti ovaj sukob. Treba znati povijest ovog sukoba kako bi se uopće moglo donijeti bilo koji sud. Mi kao Hrvatska smo duboko uvučeni u ovaj rat i snažno financijski podržavamo Zelenskog koji, kao što znamo svi, više nije predsjednik, bar ne po demokratskim principima i prema Ustavu Ukrajine, ali dalje vodi glavnu riječ. Dakle, mi kao demokratske zemlje prihvaćamo nedemokratske metode. Uglavnom, mi podržavamo snažno i dalje i naš premijer kaže da će tako i ostati, a pri tome veliki dio Hrvata uopće ne znaju što podržavaju i uopće ne znaju što je pozadina svega ovoga. Vi ste imali prilike vidjeti kroz moje emisije i kroz moje goste drugu stranu priče, a ovo je prvi put što sam ja imao prilike vidjeti nekoga, dakle novinara sa lica mjesta, koji svjedoči svemu i koji može iz prve ruke reći što se uistinu događa. Postavite se pitanje da li ste ikada susreli nekoga novinara sa lica mjesta u mainstream medijima. Odgovor je naravno ne. Zašto? Mainstream mediji su PR agencije službenog narativa i njihov je zadatak propaganda. Ne da vas informiraju, nego da vaše mišljenje formiraju. Ja se nadam da ovakve emisije, kao što je moja, će malo otvoriti vrata prema drugoj strani, pokušaju da se razumije sukob, da se razumije problem i da se onda ispravno postavi prema tom problemu. U svakom slučaju, taj rat nije naš. Mi nemamo što tražiti u našem ratu. U Hrvatskoj je rata bilo više nego dovoljno, ove ga generacije pamte. Ja sam jedan od onih koji u njemu sudjelovao i zato ću dati sve od sebe da Hrvatsku nikada ne uvuku u ničiji sukob. Mi nemamo ništa protiv Ukrajine, mi nemamo ništa protiv Rusije i kao što vidite, mi sa ovim ratom nemamo ništa. Hvala vam lijepo na pažnji i uskoro se vidimo u sljedećoj epizodi Slobodni.
Nitko vas neće natjerati da se poklonite zvijeri, učinit ćete to svoje voljno, odbacujući vjeru. Bićete laka meta za zvijer, jer se niste podredili vjeri. Ako se ne podredite vjeri, podredit ćete se zvijeri. Toliko ćete se suobličiti sa ovim svijetom, da nećete ni prepoznati da ste u zabludi. Biće to najveća demonska prevara ikada i pravedno zaslužena osuda nad nepokajanim grešnicima.
Gdje su svi oni koji su